we are going to pick it from the top again. No knowledge is lost and no knowledge is wasted, right? So again, the topic of today is about Microsoft 365 identity management. Like I said earlier, that is the screen moving? I'll just skip introduction. So let me pick it again from the top. I know from the little I've said before, because of a lot of breakage here and there, and what I've also said, you might have picked some things, but I will just reintroduce you all over again. So the objective, once again, is to understand the importance of identity management in Microsoft 365. Because we are dealing majorly with Microsoft 365, identity is about everything. Identity is tied to every single thing, whether it's on-prem, whether it's the cloud, whether it's even individual or even something you are setting up on your own or just on your local machine or computer. If somebody must access it, then they must be able to prove their identity. We'll learn about the core component, the identity lifecycle in Microsoft 365, and you'll be able to gain hands-on experience. As I said earlier, it's very important that you have access to an account or a tenant, a trial tenant, or an environment that you can use to practice what you are learning. That way you can reinforce the knowledge that you have gained from here. So let me pick it again. Now, what is identity? Once again, identity is the digital representation of your users. Like I've also said, not just users, you have devices, you have groups, you have service accounts. It is the key foundation, is the foundation of, that starts everything, that everything around you revolves on. So let's pick it again from the standard Gmail. I said, if you have to create a Gmail, one of the things they are going to ask you, an important parameter or properties they will ask you for, is the username you want to use and to specify a password. Even after specifying the password, they will ask you to put your phone number. That phone number, if you happen to forget your password at any time, you will need the phone number to be able to get back into the account. Also, you go to the market, you buy a computer, you bring it home. Yes, there will be no password there. But for you to be able to protect things that you are doing, if you have children at home, you do not want them to just stumble on things that you save on that computer. Or your friend come home and he said, oh, can you lend me your PC to use for one or two things? You want to ensure that your information on that computer is protected, right? So likewise, when you carry that computer, you want to create an account on that machine that identify you as a user to use the computer. If you have an older child that you want to use the same computer, you want to create a separate account for them so that you're able to differentiate or separate or create a kind of privacy around what you store in your profile compared to what your children are doing on their profile, right? So identity forms the basis of everything you do, whether on-prem or in the cloud. Let's take it a little bit further, right? Look at it in the aspect of, like, I will use the same analogy that Afeso just used, right? Talking about, you come to a house. In a house, a typical mansion, a typical building, you might have a fence, The building is there. There will be compound. There will be maybe the sitting room. Then there will be security house. What's the security house for? Is to ensure that not just anybody enters into that compound, right? But the security or the gate man is able to identify every single person that lives in that house. So if anybody come who is not a member of that house, he has to identify himself. What is he here for? Is he here to visit a person? Did he miss his way to come to that house against, going to the another address where he's supposed to go? So the security or the gateman have to make all of those findings before he allow. Even to some extent, you say, okay, let me try and call the person you say you're looking for. If it's a member of this family, then the person might have to come and pick them in. That's a form of identity. You identify who you are or yourself. And not just you identifying, a system or a person is able to validate that, yes, you are truly the person you say you are. So now, take it away from, the physical scenario or the personal account that we create, like the Gmail or the Outlook.com account. Let's bring it into the business world. In your organization today, when you join the company, you will need access, depending on your role within the organization, you will need access to certain resources. You will notice the IT department, or if you are part of the IT, then you will need an account, something that identifies you within the directory system. So away from the personal account, in the organization, with the identity platform or the services that is responsible for managing users, group and devices is what we call the Microsoft Active Directory. Microsoft Active Directory is a directory service that allows organizations to be able to create users, manage the users, create group, create identity for devices like the computers, to be able to identify computers on the network. Then they create policies that they are able to allow or assign maybe to a group of people depending on what their role is. That is the on-premises aspect of identity. Active Directory is what it is called from the Microsoft angle. Like I said earlier, identity related to your phone book identity is an account that is being managed within a directory. You hear directory services, and a directory service, take it like your phone book. I said, take it like your phone book. So your phone book contains different type of information. If you pick a person, that person is called a contact. That contact has certain properties. You might put it there, the first name, the last name, the gender, the address, the phone number, the country. You just put everything about that person in form of a contact. So the same way, Active Directory is also helping you to organize the property of a user account or device or group or even service account within the Active Directory system. So if you look on this screen, you will notice that we have in the center here, you have what is called Azure AD. Azure AD is Microsoft Directory Service. So we have talked about the on-prem. Now, we are going to the cloud. If we are going to the cloud, how do we manage our users? How do we create accounts? How do we give permissions? How do we set policies? If you are using the on-premise directory services or Active Directory, you can easily create group using what we call group policy. You can assign that group policy, assign it to a group that you have created, and the same permission set we apply to many people within that group. Likewise, if you have to go to the cloud using Microsoft 365, for instance, everyone that creates a tenant, whether you set up a tenant to manage Intune, you set up a tenant to manage Office 365, you set up a tenant for Azure Information Protection, and Azure, even Azure itself, there is the underlying identity platform that is created for you. That is called Azure AD. Now, Azure AD was recently renamed to Entra ID. So a lot of us are still referring to it as Azure AD Entra ID. Now, Entra ID is more robust. It contains a whole lot of security and identity and access management tools and products. So, but what we are focusing on is the Azure Active Directory. So I'll call it Azure AD, Azure Active Directory. So we will talk a bit more about some of these connections that you are seeing, like you can see on-premises. We'll talk about it later. See third-party access or SaaS, that's software as a service solution. We'll talk about it later. Let's move on from here. Now, when it comes to identity, there are processes that you have to follow to manage the identity from start to finish. Starting the starting point for an identity lifecycle is the creation of accounts. It's called provisioning. Provisioning means you are creating users, creating groups, creating roles, creating devices, or adding devices to your environment. That is provisioning. So in what instance will you be provisioning an account? If you have a new employee within your organization, that employee will need some form of access to the services, let's say email services, for them to be able to send and receive email within the organization. They will need an account to access your email service platform. Now, so this account, this process of creating this account for this user is called, this process of creating an account for this user is called identity provisioning. Now, after creating the user accounts, what will they do with it? They need to be able to do things, use it to access services. Now in the cloud, when you create a user account, there must be a purpose for you creating that user account. The aspect of assigning a particular right, a particular policy, assigning licenses, because if your user need to access email in Office 365, if they need to access Teams, if they need to access even OneDrive for business, if they need to access SharePoint, it requires a license. Unlike the on-premise version, there's really no restriction. You can create users, but when it comes to cloud, license limits a lot of things that you can do. You can create as many users as you like, even in the cloud, but without license, they cannot do anything or access resources other than maybe certain administration rights. So also the process of you assigning roles, let's say one of the users that you just employed is an IT person, and then within the IT is going to be managing exchange services. You want to empower the user to be able to carry out exchange services management activities. So in that case, you will be assigning an exchange role or administrator role to that user. So this process is called management within, it's called managing identity within Azure or within Microsoft 365 or Azure AD. Now, look at a situation where you have group of people. You have the sales department, you have the marketing department. Now, let's pick the marketing people. The marketing have different people. They have branding, they have content creator, they have maybe designer. They have the video people. So they just have different people. Now, if you have multiple individuals within each of these roles, it means the tools they need, the permission they need, the policies they need will be similar. But not everybody in marketing will need the same policy. So which means you have to create a policy or set of permissions that you assign to those group of people. So when you assign policy to a group in Office 365, every member within that group automatically get access to what permission you have assigned. So this process is called managing permission or managing identities rather in Office 365. The last step within the identity lifecycle is called deprovisioning. Now, a lot of organizations early in the days when the cloud, just became very pronounced, or when Microsoft became very, very, was becoming more and more accepted, in the world or in the market or among organizations, a lot of people, they deal with provisioning, they deal with managing, but they did not manage the deprovisioning process very well. And what is the deprovisioning process? A user have left your organization. The identity should not remain. If the identity must remain, it must be for a period of time, which means you have to meet certain compliance requirements. So they call it, the name is coming and going. When I remember, I will let you know, right? So now, when a user leaves, you have to remove their account as well from your Office 365. And before you remove an account, there are things you have to do. You have to remove the license from the user. Before you remove the license, you have to ensure that you are able to preserve certain data like their email, because once you remove the license, it's going to delete some data like email, even OneDrive or their files. So you need to first ensure that you preserve the data, either export it or convert it to what we call shared mailbox, preserve OneDrive data, and then you remove the license of the user. When the account is no longer needed completely, then you can delete the account itself. But if your organization does not require you to delete, then you want to disable it, so that you don't want a situation where an employee has left your company for a while and you notice the account is still being used. By the time you trace, you realize the same employee is actually using it from outside. So if you have to leave the account in a disabled state, you will also remember to change the password. So all of these processes is what is called deprovisioning. So those are the life cycle of identity within the cloud or within your Microsoft 365. Now, let's talk about the identity types that have to do with Azure Active Directory, right? Azure Active Directory, as I have said, Azure AD is an identity provider. I've said it, is the identity provider from Microsoft. When you sign up for any cloud services, this particular platform, identity platform, is bundled with your solution, with your product that you have purchased from them. So now, unlike the Microsoft or Windows Server Active Directory that you use on-prem, the Azure AD is cloud-based. It's purely in the cloud. It's the cloud directory service that you use to manage your users, your group, and devices. Then talking about integration is not just about creating users and group. There are times where you have other applications, even applications that you created on-prem, or you have even third party like Salesforce, or you are using any other this particular drive. There's this other drive different cloud services. You can actually integrate your Azure Active Directory. You can integrate it with other services, other cloud services. So what does this mean? It means when your users use your Azure AD account that you have created for them to access any other services or products that is not on Microsoft platform, you are managing the identity from a single source against managing username and password here, or you manage credential for this user here, manage this account. You know, some organizations today, if you go, they have on-premise Active Directory. They have a different account for that. That account, they use it in logging onto their computer to log into the Active Directory. They have some other line of business application. If you check some of those applications also have their own inbuilt user credentials that have been created. So it doesn't have any link or relationship with the Active Directory. So that way, user is left to manage multiple identity or multiple accounts, and they can easily forget password. This usually leads to fatigue for the IT because user keep coming back. Let me reset my password. Can you reset my password? I forgot my password. So, but if you are able to integrate Azure Active Directory with those applications, you are doing password reset will be from one place. And there are even advanced features that allow users to even manage their own password and manage their identity by themselves. So if you have to authenticate, so the process of when we mean authentication is now the validation of the identity or the accounts that you have created within your Active Directory. So Azure AD can also authenticate third-party application outside of Microsoft 365. Then some of the key features that we have with Azure AD are what we call single sign-on. So this is SSO, single sign-on. That's what it means. There is single sign-on. And what does single sign-on mean? Look at a scenario where you have multiple applications. In the past, where we use just the Active Directory on-prem, what we do is when we want to log into our Outlook, we'll sign in. Outlook will ask you, put in your username and password, you put it. Then maybe you want to do something on SharePoint. SharePoint will ask you, put in your username and password, you put it. It's different from the one you enter as at the time you wanted to connect to your computer. So almost every application that you are accessing, they are all asking you for username and password. You can imagine if a user have to access 20 password like 100 times a day, it means he might need to be entering the username and password 100 times a day. I mean 20 applications. So now, what does the single sign-on, what it does is, that's Azure AD allow user to use their username, their account to log into almost all the applications. So once you sign into one application, every other application pick this credential and they don't ask you again to sign in a second time because they see that it's on the same machine, or even the moment you log into your computer, it's intelligent to say you are the user on the computer, and every app you launch within that your profile automatically pick the credential you use to sign into your PC. That is what we call single sign-on. It also empowers or has a feature that is called multi-factor authentication. What does multi-factor authentication mean? It means multiple factor authentication, meaning ability to use more than just username and password to sign in to your computer or to sign into your application or to access resources at all. So it goes beyond using username and password. The standard way is you put in your username, you ask you for password, you put it, and you are in. But this is another level. Take it like the bank. If every single one of us that have bank accounts, you might need maybe hardware token. Once you create internet banking, you will need either hardware token or software token. Every time you want to carry out a transaction, it will ask you for a token, a one-time password that you can use to further validate that you are the one that log in to that platform to carry out or perform a transaction. That is the same way MFA or multi-factor authentication work in Microsoft 365. So also look at a situation where a user is currently in a country. Within 2 hours or an hour, the user is trying to access another resource and is being seen, or the system notice, oh, this user is coming from another country. That's what they call impossible travel. So if we look at why will the user that just signed in here now, in 1 hour, to get to this particular country, to take this number of hours. But no, this is not. Then it's possible that this is not the right user. Then it blocks the user and asks you if truly you are the one, you so provide a second level of authentication. So in this case, let me say in which situation will this apply? One, it can be either a true attacker that is trying to access your account, or it is not an attacker, it is you. Probably you have Azure. If you have Microsoft Azure and you set up a virtual machine in another country. So if you are trying to use the same account, definitely that computer is different from where you are. So in that case, you can provide a second level of authentication to validate that you are the one. Then we have what we call conditional access. How does this work? If you have, let's say, the policy says everybody, once they are in the office and they are using your office internet, meaning your office public IP address, you want to ensure that they can easily log in without being stressed or ask anything else. So in this case, you do certain configuration or configure conditional access to allow users to be able to log into the platform when they are within your office building and using your internet. It's not that they are in your building, but using their hotdog or mobile dongle or mobile data. It will not work. They will be asked to revalidate there. But as long as they are using your internet and they are using your approved public IP that you have configured on your internet device, then they will be allowed to access resources. It might not also be maybe second level, it might be just if they're accessing from somewhere else, let them provide other authentication, other means of identification. So that's the same way here. So I'm going to move on here. Now, as I said earlier, Azure Active Directory is your identity platform in the cloud. And it enables your employees, your guests, and others to be able to sign in and access resources that you have assigned to them or that they need to do their work. Now, like I said earlier, Azure Active Directory is part of Entra, that's Microsoft Entra. So Microsoft Entra. Microsoft Entra is the product family that contain much more identity products than just the Active Directory, right? So the Azure AD or Azure Active Directory provide again a single identity platform for all your cloud. All cloud, this is what we are talking about. Business partner. Business partner could be other cloud services. Maybe like you have services in Amazon, for instance. You can actually connect. You have Salesforce that your users are using to, to manage users, to manage support and all of that. You can actually integrate that to your Azure Active Directory. Now, what about instances where an organization who is currently in the on-premise environment, right? Before they moved to cloud, they have their services that they were using before. Does it mean If they now decide to go to the cloud, does it mean they will be completely disconnected? Or does it mean the cloud services will be completely disconnected from that of the on-prem? No. I said earlier that you can have your own line of business applications that you created on-prem. You can integrate it with Azure so that Azure AD, the identity provider there, will also be the one providing identity or validating user access to these applications that you have in your on-premises environment, right? Then also, if you already have your Active Directory on-prem before, you can also integrate them, link them together, create a tunnel. When I mean tunnel, I mean there's a tool that is called Azure Active Directory Sync that allow you to be able to connect or link your Azure Active Directory with your on-premises Active Directory so that users can continue to use just a single identity to access resources, whether in on-prem or in the cloud, right? That is the way Azure Active Directory within the Microsoft Entra work. And I cannot overemphasize this, that each of its 365 or Microsoft 365 services, or even Dynamics or online subscription, they automatically uses your Azure AD tenant. If you sign up for any service, the first service, by the time you are trying to sign up for a second one, the moment you sign in, it asks you to put your email address. It check, oh, do you already have an Azure AD? Yes, you do. It automatically link that particular service you are trying to add. It links it to your same Azure Active Directory so that you will be able to manage your identity from a single platform, right? So now there are identity types when it comes to your Active Directory or your Azure Active Directory. We have talked about it, that it manages user. User is any individual, right? A user is representing any person, any individual within your organization that need to access certain resources that must be authenticated, right? So it could be your colleagues, it could be an employee, it could even be guests or even your business partner, right? That you want them to come to your tenant or your Microsoft 365 environment to access certain resources. You use Azure Active Directory to manage that. So one of the identity types that you have is user accounts. So within the user accounts, you also have group accounts. And how does group form? How is a group form? You have a set of users that need similar permission or similar policy. You won't be creating different policies and be assigning it to users one after the other. What you will do in that instance is you create a group and then you add users to this group and apply policies to that group. So that way, every user that is a member of that group inherits the permission that you have assigned to the group. Now, another type of identity you have is what we call device identity. So your device identity could be a piece of hardware like your laptop, can be your mobile phone or mobile devices, or it can be a server, it can be even a printer. So devices can be set up in different ways, right? In your Azure Active Directory. You have Azure only devices. You have what we call, that's Azure AD join. That means the device is only existing or recognized within your Azure Active Directory. You have what we call hybrid AD join. So for organizations that have existing on-premises Active Directory and they integrate their Active Directory, their on-premise Active Directory with Azure AD, that the devices they have, they can enable what we call hybrid AD join for those devices, so that you can do partly management of those devices with, or anywhere they go. If you want to assign certain policy, you'll be applying it to them from Azure AD and it will work. However, Azure Active Directory is actually not as robust as that of the on-prem. So in the advanced part of this course or this program, we will talk a bit more, or we will dive deeper, a bit deeper into, the differences between the two identity platform, right? Or the two identity provider. So it's not as robust. However, you have also different flavor of Azure Active Directory. You have the Azure AD, you have the Microsoft Azure Active Directory service. If you want to get close to the features, close to what you have on the on-premises Active Directory, then you'll be going for the Azure Active Directory domain services. That is also a cloud identity provider that you have, that you can subscribe to. But this is the general thing for anybody that have Office 365, right? So in the advance, we'll talk more about, all of those other directory types. Now, the other identity type you have is what we call service principal. Service principal now, they are representing application. How does this work? When you have your application and you want that application to be able to authenticate this application now, not user, the application need to carry out some tasks. Let's see in which let's look at it this way. You created an app that will be used by your users as well, or an application or a line of business application. Now, you want your users to, anytime they log in, they want to access anything on that application. The application will take some action. One is to validate who is trying to access this service, or for the application to carry out some task, maybe like what the task is. When a user creates a particular, hit a particular button within that application, the application itself should connect to another service and create things or do things or log data there. So in that way, there will be a need for handshake between the line of business application and the other service that is going to be logging in to perform an action. So that way, you have to create what we call service account. So service account in the cloud, they are representing service principal. So when you hear service principal, don't let it be, it shouldn't be strange to you. It's a type of identity that you have in on Azure AD that allow your application to be able to identify themselves and ensure that they have access to perform the action that they are trying to perform, right? That is what service principal is. And we have finally what we call managed identity. Managed identity is also a type of service principal that provides that is provided for an application to use when connecting to resources that support Azure Active Directory authentication. So now, where it will be very easy for you is this. Your developers are creating, they are creating application, or they are creating application, even for them to continue to log in to build. As they are building, they need to test it. They need to do a few things with that application. So they need to build a form of identity service within the application that before they even access it, it asks them to identify themselves. So the developers can actually integrate the application as they are coding right there. They can integrate it with your Azure Active Directory. And that way, they wouldn't have to be managing the credential. Another way we can look at it is this. Look at GitHub for Enterprise or Azure DevOps, right? Now, every time the user your developers need to connect, or they created an app, they are using a database within Azure, right? Or wherever they're using it from. But they need an account to validate between the database and the application. So they can actually use managed identity to manage the authentication or control the authentication between this application. So I'm not seeing my screen. I hope there are no questions. Okay. Sorry, am I still flowing?
Yes, ma, you're flowing. Ma, there's a question for you. Someone asked the question, ma. Should I go ahead to read the question out?
Okay, okay, wait, let's see. I just wanted to get our attention that we are still here. I think we should take the question after
Okay,
the yes, after the slide,
ma.
before we go into the demo aspect of it. So now let's quickly talk about Azure AD and then versus on-premise Active Directory. I think I've been saying, quite a lot about them. But your Azure, your on-premise, starting with your on-premise Active Directory, is the traditional directory services or identity platform that is honed and developed by Microsoft. It was introduced in Windows 2000 for users to have a way, or organizations to have a way to be able to authenticate users and devices within their organization. And it exists within your local infrastructure. Now, when I mean within your local infrastructure, that local infrastructure can be either on-prem in your own officially owned building or data center, or in a co-located data center with another, maybe an ISP or service provider that is providing a location for you to come and host your server hardware, and they will power it and provide other things. So Active Directory can be existing there. Also, you can also decide to set up a virtual machine in Azure and install the standard Windows Active Directory domain services. That is the on-premise Active Directory. So it is used also for identity management and access management. Identity is the process of validating yourself or having a user or an account to identify who you are. Then access is now the permission that is given to you as an account to be able to do certain things within the organization. So naturally, what Active Directory does, there are three things it takes care of. It is called the AAA, right? You have the authentication, authorization, and accounting. So when you have, the first thing you have to do is to have an identity. Now, when you have an identity, you need someone to validate that you are actually the person that you are. That is the process of authentication. Now, when you are authenticated, what do you have to do? What are you authorized to do? The permission that is assigned to you, the Active Directory will look at that account, the permission, what you are allowed to do and not to do. Then it gives you authorization. You will notice sometimes when you are trying to access a resource you don't have access to, you see access denied. That is because you do not have authorization to access that particular resource. That's why you are getting that error. Then the third one is the accounting. Now, when you access resources that you are authorized to access, what did you do with them? What were the actions that you performed? What are the things you do? What are the activities that happen within that permission? Then it accounts for it. It logs it for management purpose, for audit purposes, right? That's the way your Active Directory, which is the on-prem, that's the way it functions. It's not different from that of the cloud. The process is all the same, right? The only difference is that one is hosted locally within a virtual machine, while the other one is cloud-based. Now, the cloud-based Azure services or Azure AD is ideal for managing software as a service application, but not only that, right? Any application that you can access on the browser and that supports OAuth authentication. There are about 3 authentication method or protocols that you can that Azure AD support, right? So any application that supports that will be able to use your Azure Active Directory. Then we have what we call the difference also, right, is that Azure Active Directory powers what we call hybrid identity. I said the other time, if you already have an on-premise account, or you already have an on-premise identity service that you're using, and now you are moving to the cloud, are you going to junk the on-premises services for the cloud? No. You are even you're moving to the cloud, it's not going to be, all at once. It might not be a big bang because there will be a lot of downtime. So you want to take it gradually. You want to take it in bits until you are able to remove your footprint completely from the on-prem and completely now move to the cloud. So that process of collocating the two environments, the cloud and the on-prem, the process of them collocating together is called hybrid. So hybrid identity is also available, and Azure Active Directory is powering that with the help of a tool that you have to install that stands in between as a middleman, right? It's called Azure AD Sync, now Entra ID Sync or Entra ID Connect, right? So I talk a bit, one of the features also that I talk that is basic and come with every Azure Active Directory is the single sign-on and the multi-factor authentication. Single sign-on, like I said, you sign in just once and you have access to all applications that is authenticating against that directory platform. While multi-factor authentication is giving you an extra layer of security, further proof who you say you are. Are you truly Titi? Oh, what's your name? My username is Titilope, then my password is password. But now, can you tell us that you are truly the one trying to access this? Then he asks you for one-time password. That one-time password can be different things. It can be something you have. It can be something you know. It can be something you are or something you own, right? So you can use a combination of different method, right, to do that authentication, to complete the multiple level. Remember, just relate it to your GT, if you have GT or any bank account, your internet banking, transfer transaction that require additional verification to validate that you are the one. Take it as that. That's exactly the way it works. But it's now it might be more advanced within Active Directory, but we are going to stick just majorly with, not going so deep into it. Now, something else that Azure Active Directory gave is what they call external identities. External identities, what does this mean? There might be a situation where you have partner companies that you are working with, and you need to be able to, let's say you have a project. Yes, this is a good one. You have a project that you want to embark on. Now, the people doing the organization doing the project for you, they are not your employee, they are not in your organization. But you want to ensure that you are able to control what they are doing with your data. Or there can be a requirement that say every project document must remain within your own directory, must remain under your control, or must remain within your infrastructure. So you need a way to allow those vendor or those partners who are going to be doing project with you. You need a way for them to come into your own IT infrastructure and come and use the services, and you are able to tell what they are doing. So the business to business collaboration is allowing that. So business to business collaboration allow you to share your applications and resources with external users. This is another example. You have maybe a partner company that you just that you are working together. You have Dynamics application in-house, and you want that your partner, you want some of their users to come and use the Dynamics license that you have within your same Dynamics infrastructure, so that they can key in their data, maybe sales data or accounting data and all of that. So in that way, you will create an account, invite their own account. When they accept that invitation, if they are also on Azure AD, it's going to see them as external identity type. Then you'll be able to assign licenses to those accounts, right? Then you have to business to consumer access access management type, right? It's an identity management solution for consumers and customers facing applications. So in this instance, you have an application that you are selling to your user, to your customers. And this application requires a form of authentication. Now, you are going to do integration with Active Directories so that your customers, once they subscribe to that particular solution, they can use their own Azure Active Directory credential or login detail to access the same application. Or business to consumer is what is powering you to be able to use your own even identity to connect to things like LinkedIn. You can integrate with LinkedIn. You can integrate it with Salesforce, like we said the other time, and a whole lot of other solutions out there. So that's another type of Active Directory identity, external identity in Azure Active Directory. So what we are going to do is, I think this will be maybe about the last slide, right? So that we can quickly look at the practical aspect of how all of this thing work. Now, there is what they call role-based access control. When you create an account in Office 365 or Microsoft 365, each account have a role that is assigned to them. It might be user role. A user role is just a simple user account that doesn't have access to anything else. Now, where we role-based access control comes in, we gave an example of IT. IT, they need certain admin roles or admin privileges to be able to do certain things within the Microsoft 365 platform. So you will use Azure Active Directory to assign roles to those accounts. And those roles that are created, they contain set of permissions. Permissions are attributes or properties or services that those roles, anybody who is assigned to those roles can access, right? So when it comes to roles within Azure Active Directory, we have the built-in roles, right? The built-in roles when we go there, you will see it. You will see different type of admins. You will see global administrator role. You will see exchange admin role. You will see identity or Azure AD role. You will see different kind of roles. But you can also create your own. For instance, a particular role that come default might be having too much permission or too much access, and you want to reduce what permission. So against using the built-in, you create your own custom one and specify what you want and what you don't want for that user or for the roles. So anyone you apply the roles to inherits the permission that is attached to the role. Then categories of roles in Azure AD, we have Azure AD specific roles, we have service specific role, and we have cross service specific role, right? So, but what's RBAC really doing is granting access, only the necessary access that a user need to perform their task, right? I think I hope I'm able to break that down for us. So, okay, we are getting there, right? Now, let's talk very quickly about Microsoft 365 identity models. I said the moment you create any Microsoft Cloud service, automatically you get access to the Azure Active Directory that you will use to manage your user. But there are decisions you need to take around that. If it is an organization that is new, that's fresh, that you're starting, a startup that is just starting, Cloud Identity, Azure Active Directory will survive for them. It's okay for them. It's good. But what if you already have an on-premises environment? You have your on-premises Active Directory that you are using to manage your users before. What do you want? Do you want your users to manage two identities, one to access Microsoft 365 services and one to access the on-premises services? If that is what you are looking at, you'll be going for the cloud identity. The cloud identity is purely Azure AD only in the cloud. So in this case, we will say the source of authority is being mastered in the cloud, right? We'll get to that slide. Let me not jump, right? And we have also said for this cloud identity or cloud only identity, any organization that does not have any thing on-prem, that's zero on-premise footprint, or new startup businesses, they can actually go with this. Or small organizations, they can manage with cloud identity. Then the second one is the synchronized identity. How does the synchronized identity work? You already have your Azure Active Directory that is managing your user identity on-prem. And now you have signed up for Office 365 or Microsoft 365 that gave you another identity provider in the cloud. You need to create users, for instance, and you need to decide, do you want the user to use the same account, username that they are using on-prem, or even with password? So you can choose to sync just the user account and not sync their password. So which means they will still manage two passwords. So you need to make this decision here, right? If you already have Azure AD, I don't want to complicate matter further for the users. All I want to do is just create a form of merging. Though it's not merging, what it's doing is your identity on-prem still remain, the account still remain on-prem, but what it does is it's syncing like a copy to the cloud. However, there is parameter or ID, that's identifier, unique identifier that is identifying a particular user in the cloud and matching it with that of the on-prem, right? So now, in the process of your syncing, I said you need to decide whether you just want to sync the users and group, or you want to sync both the user and sync even their password. When you sync their password as well, it means they can use the same username and password to log into, to sign into Microsoft 365 services, at the same time sign into on-premises application and to their computer that they use in accessing these services. So is a like between 0 and 3 additional on-premises server. So this one, what it means is, if you have to go this approach, there's no investment, only your cloud. But this approach require you to set up another server different from your on-premises Active Directory domain services server, right? This server will be hosting what we call the directory synchronization tool, or Entra ID. Now it is Entra Connect, Entra ID Connect app that is called, right? But today, now you can co-locate. Before, you need a dedicated server that is not a domain controller to host this tool for you. But today, you can install it on your same domain controller that you have on-prem. So when I say domain controller, I'm referring to a computer in your on-premises environment that is running a Microsoft, a Windows Active Directory domain services service, right? That's what is called a domain controller, right? Now, the third one, now, the third one now is what we call federated identity. What's the difference here? For this Azure Active Directory sync, there is possibility that, when you log into your computer, it's not you use the password. What it's doing is giving you what we call single or same sign-on. Same sign-on, meaning you are using the same credential across. But different application at some point might be asking you, or will be asking you rather, to sign in. So what do I mean by that? If you launch Office application that is assigned, that was licensed by, or is licensed by Microsoft 365 license, it will ask you to sign in, to validate. If you launch your Outlook, you want to connect, it will ask you to sign in. If you launch Teams, so even though it is the same identity that you are using across the cloud and on-prem, you are going to require, you might be required to log in to different applications that require you to authenticate separately. However, you are using the same credential. Now, the third one, this federated identity, this is what is powering single sign-on that we talk about, SSO that we talk about the other time. Any organization that have on-prem, now they are synchronizing, they sync their identity, and then they now want a situation where once users sign into their computer, automatically every application automatically picks the credential. It's called federated identity. So in this case, you will need to configure Azure AD. Like I said, Azure AD can be AD Connect rather, or Entra Connect can be hosted on your domain controller or can sit on its own on a different server. Then you need a service that is called Active Directory Federation Service Server. You have to set that up. So that's a different server. That cannot co-locate, or it cannot sit together, or cannot be installed on the same server as your domain controller. So in this case, you will be using maybe two more server. So there's more investment in this aspect. Why I'm saying this is, a lot of time you hear when you go to the cloud, it reduces the costs. Not in all cases, depending on what you want to do in the cloud. So have that at the back of your mind, right? Now, what Azure Active Directory have done today is ability for organizations to also be able to set up to set up federated identity without the need to set up ADFS or to set up Active Directory Federation Service server, right? So you have that now available with Entra ID, right? Now, this slide is just trying to give us a bit of differences between the type of identity, but I'm picking just cloud identity and hybrid identity. This hybrid identity contains the synchronized identity, it's a form of hybrid identity, then federated identity. So it's two in one, right? Before, in case you are wondering, how come I don't have maybe cloud identity, synchronized identity, and federated identity? Now, when you are part of, to help you decide or make up your mind of the type of identity model that you want to use with your Microsoft 365 is to understand what you can do, right? The cloud-only identity means user exists only in your Microsoft Entra tenant or Azure Active Directory tenant. That is where they exist. Why hybrid is syncing your existing Active Directory domain services user. It sync a copy of it to Microsoft Entra, right? And then here, when you are using the cloud-only identity, we say the source of authority is in the cloud. What does it mean? When you want to sign in or your user want to access an application, they open their browser and they go to portal.office.com or outlook.com and he asks them to sign in. They type in their username. He asks them for password. They type in their password. Who is asking, once you type the username, the Azure Active Directory or Entra ID picks that username and then say, okay, I have this user in my directory, but can you give me your password? Let me confirm you are the one. Then when you put the password, it gives you access now to the resource your account have access to. Now, everything you are doing, managing the account, creating the account, the authority who have a say in what you can do with that account is your Azure Active Directory. That's the cloud-only identity. Now, on the other hand, when you have hybrid identity, right? We say the master source of authority or the master source is the on-premises Active Directory. Now, if you are syncing your password, right? If you sync the user and you sync the password as well for the user, once a user goes to their browser, type outlook.com or portal.office.com and they hit enter, it asks them to sign in with a username. He gets the username. Azure AD actually received that username. When Azure AD received the username, say, oh, yes, I have you here, but who's supposed to authenticate you? Oh, I have a connection to your on-premises Active Directory. Then it sends that request, your request that you are trying to access a service. It sends the request back to the on-premises server through the Entra Connect server. Then the Entra Connect server contacts your on-premises domain controller who says, yes, this user exists and is valid. Then the password that you have entered also is also presented, right? So now this guy has confirmed that, or the on-premises Active Directory has confirmed that you exist. He gives signal back to Azure AD Connect. AD Connect gives signal back to Azure AD. Then he asks you for your password. You sign in you enter your password. You go again. You now go again to ask the AD. The AD now, the Active Directory now collect it and issue a token it issued a token. It's the only one that can give you access. It issued a token and send that token back to your Azure, to the Azure Active Directory. Now, Azure Active Directory will now, with that token, allow you to access the services for the session, for either for as long as the session lasts or until you sign out of that particular platform. So now this password that is being synced, somebody can ask, if an hacker is able to issue a man-in-the-middle attack, right? I'm going, but you get to understand that. Man in the middle is an attacker sits down and intercepts your traffic somewhere in the middle between the source and the destination. So the source is sending information. The man in the middle, who is the attacker, receives it and pretending to be the destination. So the source will not know that he's actually not hitting the right destination. Everything that you are sending now, the attacker is having a view to it. So you might be asking, is there no possibility that attacker can get access to the password that is being sent? Yes, you are correct to ask that question. But the truth is, it is not the actual password that is being sent. It is what they call the hash, not even the hash, but the hash of your password. So which means if that hash of the hash is tapped or is intercepted, they have to reverse it to the original hash before they then reverse it to the password. And you can imagine how long that would take the attacker to be hashing, unhashing, and unhashing before he gets the actual password. So that's one clear difference between the cloud-only identity and hybrid identity. The other thing is how your users authenticate with Office 365. Like I've said, the process that I just described up here is what is talking about here, that the Entra ID either handles the authentication process or redirects the user to another identity provider, which is your on-premises Active Directory. So in which way will it undo it? If you are doing just synchronized identity, it's going to undo it. That's without password sync. It's going to undo it by itself. The only way to redirect is if you are doing the full, you are syncing the directory and you are syncing the password. Then you must consult another master to validate you, right? Then the cloud identity is best, like we said earlier, for organizations that does not have any on-premise footprint. When we say footprint, we mean they don't have any resource on-prem at all. Then, or they don't have any need for on-premise Active Directory, or they might even have. There are some organizations that I've seen, they said they just want to keep everything separate. There might be compliance requirement that they have to meet for that. And that's why they're keeping it that way. So, but majorly it's good for organizations of small size that does not have so many users that they are managing across site. Why this is for organizations that have full-blown, they have primary data center, they have secondary data center here and there, and they want to be able to simplify how their users sign in and access resources, right? Now, the benefit is that the cloud identity is simple. No extra server is required. No extra tool is required to be installed. No special setting or tunnels to be created. You just start creating your user and start managing them directly in the cloud there. While on the on-prem, user can use the same credential when accessing on-prem and cloud-based resources. And what this also means, if you are using this, the moment you synchronize your AD, whether you are using synchronized identity or you are using federated identity, the moment you synchronize your Active Directory on-prem to Azure Active Directory or Entra ID, automatically for you to make certain change to the user, you must always go back to make that change on your on-premises domain controller, which will then sync back to the cloud. I also want to make mention that syncing is one way. Syncing is one direction. Now, it's not that two-way is not possible, but for two ways to be possible, you need to take extra step. When it comes to identity, if you sync your Active Directory, you sync your user, then any user you create on-prem within the confinement of the sync containers, if you create container, if you did not sync your entire Active Directory, within that confinement, if you create a user in an OU or a container that is synced to the cloud, automatically that user will be synced. If you go to your Azure AD, you will see the user there. But if you create a user in the cloud, it will not sync back to on-prem. Now, for you to be able to have two-way sync for identity, you will need a feature of Azure Active Directory. Okay, so that brings me maybe briefly to talk about the plans. The Azure Active Directory have different plans. The one that is issued to you or that is given to you, that is provided or provision for you when you create your cloud service subscription is the basic Azure Active Directory, right? By the time you need to now do two-way sync, if you want a way, if I want to sync, if I create a user in the cloud, I want it to also sync back to the on-premise domain controller or Active Directory, then you will need another plan. There is now Azure Active Directory or Entra ID Plan 1 and Plan 2. Depending on the plan you have more features that you can use, right? I think just going a bit further, we have already talked a lot about the cloud-only identity, but putting an image or a diagram to it, yes, you have cloud-only identity here once again. It is identity of your users that exist only in the cloud in Entra ID. And typically for small organizations, I've already said it, or new businesses. And this is it. Your on-premise, if you have one, they are all standing as they are. While your Azure AD is just there in the cloud with Microsoft 365, and your remote user, depending on where their resources they want to come and access it, they can either come over the internet to access resources in Microsoft 365, or they come via VPN to access resources that are on-prem, right? Then this is just an image also that illustrates the hybrid identity. You have your on-premises infrastructure, you have your Active Directory domain services servers or group of servers that you have already created here. You have your accounts that are existing here, and your users have one account each on your Active Directory. So what you do is you set up a server in the middle or a tool. It's called Azure AD Connect or Entra ID Connect. You set it up and it helps you sync the user from here all the way to the cloud. So what is syncing again is not moving the user, it's sending a copy of the account that exists here, is sending them to the cloud. And users from the internet can easily access resources here without needing VPN, to go to the on-prem, right? Except there are things they need to access from the on-prem environment. So that brings us to the end of the theory, and we are going to go into the demo. So here, the lab, we are going to create users. We'll see how we'll create users in Azure, in Entra ID now. Let's start calling it the right name. We are going to create users in Entra ID. Yes.
Thank you very much for this session. Let's check with the our mentees first if they still want
Okay.
us to do the labs today, because
Okay.
in the
Okay.
chat they are complaining
Fine,
that
my
they're
bro.
fatigued. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
want
Okay.
us to
Sorry.
still have the lab today, please can you indicate in the chat, or we can just move the lab to tomorrow's session.
Let me stop sharing. I see my screen.
I think I have to create a poll for this. Emmanuel,
Okay.
can you please create a poll for it so that we can know
So tomorrow, I think
Okay.
majority are voting for tomorrow. So
tomorrow? Okay.
yes, let's take it tomorrow. But the questions you have, let me attend to them.
All right. So I think that's better. So Emmanuel, you can help Madam Titi with the questions.
Okay, ma. So some of the questions that they asked, although Emmanuel answered some of them. So let me just quickly go so I can just pick the first question that was asked. So the first question that was asked, somebody said, can we relate MFA to two-factor authentication? That was what
Yes.
somebody asked.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma.
That's exactly two-factor. I was trying to look for another name that is very common. You can hear multi-factor, multiple factor, two-factor, three-factor, like that. They are all saying additional layer or additional verification method for your identity or for authentication. Yeah.
Okay, ma. And another person also asked again, he was like, thank you, ma, for your teaching. I want you to shed more light on the conditional access. I think this person has more interest in conditional access.
Okay. So conditional access, like I said, let's look at it this way. Um, you have uh, let's take it this way. Now that we're operating remote work, right? Work from home or hybrid work, you have a situation where some people are connecting from home and some are connecting from the office. Now, let's say you are expected, everyone connecting from home, you are expected them to connect from the country where your business is located, right? I won't say Nigeria because we might have people that are not Nigerians here. You're expecting them to connect from the country where your business is located. The next thing, you don't have any user in Japan, and a user is connecting from Japan. Probably the user have traveled to Japan and is trying to connect. So you can create a condition. So conditional access means a user must meet certain conditions before he get access into the services that is trying to access, right? So you can say, if a user is connecting, take Nigeria now, for instance, if my users are connecting from Nigeria, permit, you can block access from anywhere else. Like China, we don't do any form of business with China. So nobody should be connecting from China. We don't do any form of business with Russia, for instance. Nobody should be connecting from Russia. So you can decide to block certain countries where you don't want user to connect from. So if a user now choose to travel to any of those locations, they must have informed you or informed the organization, who will now create an exception for that user. You can create another condition that says, okay, this particular user for this period of time, let him be able to sign in from this particular location. That's one. Another way is this. When your users are within the on-premises building, they are expected to use your internet that you have provided for them to access Microsoft 365 services. So you want a situation whereby when people are connecting, they should not, they should be allowed access without asking second level of authentication, for instance, that without asking for 2FA. Right? Let me use the word 2FA. Maybe it will be easier for people. Now, when people, but now we have some people that are within the office building, but they are using their internet dongle. So you cannot trust anything. That's what it means. You cannot trust anything that is traveling outside of your own internet, where you are able to filter traffic Remember, when you have your internet, your office internet, you have firewall that is filtering traffic for your users. So that way, you know, you are sure, you trust to some level or to an extent who is passing through or which traffic is passing through that particular firewall. So in this case, you want to say when users are connecting through your firewall, they should be allowed to access resources without extra stress of providing another level. Now, this is another scenario. You want a situation where anytime user want to access anything in your organization, any service within your organization, they must use their computer that is assigned by the organization, which means that computer must be joined to either your local Active Directory or your Azure Active Directory. So if a user now want to open his browser on his personal computer and he want to access portal.office.com to access your organization email or document, for instance, it will be blocked that you are not allowed to use these particular devices. That is conditional access. Conditional access is also you have a browser that is a authorized browser that's supposed to be used within the organization. People are supposed to use Edge, but you have those that are downloading different, you are just seeing different kind of browser on people's computer. And you don't want them, because you can't trust the security of those browsers. So you can create a condition or a conditional access that says the browser users are using must be Microsoft Edge. If it's not Microsoft Edge, they cannot access your company resources. I hope I'm able to provide more clarity to that for the person who asked the question.
Yeah, yes, ma. I believe you have done justice to that question. So there's still another question on the chat. So let me go to that one. So somebody asked that, what is the relationship between M365 and MS Server? Then the person now put in brackets ADDS. He now said, I've been hearing it since the training. Like, are they dependent? That's the question, ma.
M365.
Yes,
I
ma.
believe if you were in the introductory class, I think you must have, if you missed that, maybe you should revisit it. Microsoft 365 really is a cloud service, right? That allow organizations to bring their collaboration to communication, collaboration services, communication services, identity services, even up to desktop application like your normal office application to the cloud. So as Active Directory, Windows Active Directory is your identity provider that you have on-prem that is helping you to manage your users. How do you get that? You need to set up a server, install a Windows server, that's Microsoft Windows Server on it, and you add a role that is called Active Directory Domain Services. You add that role. Once you add the role, you start creating your users and group and managing the computers within that Active Directory server. Now, you see that there's different. Office 365 or Microsoft 365 is more than just identity part, or it's more than just Active Directory. Active Directory is part of your Microsoft 365, but it contains more than Active Directory. It has Active Directory to manage your users. It has Exchange Online to manage email communication in and out of your organization. It has SharePoint Online to manage document sharing, departmental and file, team sites, collaboration, search center, a whole lot of things that SharePoint can do. It gives you access, depending on your license, it gives you access to OneDrive for Business, right? OneDrive for Business is a cloud, is an online storage that you use to store your file and be able to access it from anywhere you are in the world, as long as you have internet. Now, Active Directory is on-prem. You have to be locally within the location where that Active Directory server is located to access services, unlike the Microsoft 365, where you can access it from anywhere. So please revisit module 1 or the second class, not the first, second class, which happened last week, Sunday, so that you can have more understanding of Microsoft 365. But Active Directory is just an identity management or provider that you have either on-prem or in the cloud. So Emmanuel,
Okay.
Oyimafu.
Thank you. Thank you, ma. So I believe there's another question there. So somebody is asking, it's like, oh, he said, can the identity model you lectured us be integrated in any mobile app or web application, or is strictly for Microsoft service?
No, I believe the persons will have gotten answer by now, because I said a lot about integrating your on-premises application that you build for your users, or even the one you purchase from a third-party provider, as long as it supports the authentication protocol that Azure Active Directory support, you are able to allow your user to authenticate, use their Microsoft 365 credential, username, account to sign into any other application that supports the authentication protocols.
Okay, ma. Okay, ma. Another person still asks, although you answered it, but let me just still ask it again. The person said, if you are using on-prem, can it be accessed outside the premises? I believe maybe the person is trying to say outside the on-premise environment, like at home or over the internet. That's what the person is asking, ma.
Yes, it can, but you have to take extra step. One way is to set up VPN, but the best way now is to integrate it with Azure AD using, you have Azure Active Directory proxy, you have the ability to just expose it to to Azure Active Directory. So you can integrate it with Azure Active Directory, or you can use VPN. That way you'll be able to access that resource from anywhere in the world if your organization support it.
Okay, ma. So another person still asks again, he said, what is the difference between user license and user identity?
Okay. User identity is an account. Is an account. It can be a contact, can be a user account, it can be a group account, it can be a device that you join to Intune or Azure AD, for instance. Why license is like the right to use a particular service. The account is just an account if it does not have a license to access a particular service. So for instance, I create an account for user 1 and 2. I want user 1 and 2 to be able to do email. I want them to be able to do Teams. Then I need to assign a license that have email, that's Exchange, and have Teams to each of those users. That way, they will be able to do what I want them to do. But without the license, they cannot do anything. It's just an account. Hi, Oyimafu. Hello, you are muted.
Yes, ma. Sorry, ma. I was talking on mute. So we are having a lot of questions in the chat, ma. So I'll just take
Maybe
3
we'll
questions.
take the rest. I don't know.
Uh,
Maybe we'll take, or you
Let
want
me
me to
just,
still go on?
yeah, let me just
Can
pick 3
identity
questions.
model you lecture on to us be integrated in any mobile app? Yes, we've answered that.
You have
What's the
answered that one.
difference between license? We've answered that. Show that one. Is one single
Yes.
sign-on, two-factor authentication, and multi-factor authentication more effective than another? No. Single sign-on is using the same identity, the same account to sign in everywhere, just one time. But while you are signing in to one application that will now, where others will now pick their authentication from, you might be asked to enter your two-factor authentication for it. So there are two different things. Okay, I
There's another
think
question. maybe we can just take this one for the last. The person is saying, I have an ADDS on-prem with users and computer management with local domain, e.g. console.local, and I have an M365 user created separately from another domain, contoso.com. Username were created differently on-prem compared to what was made on the M365 cloud, e.g. they now gave a name on-prem and Akinwale Idowu M365. How do I
Okay.
sync users and computers to have a handshake with my on-prem and Microsoft 365?
Okay, for your users, even that there can be scenarios where an organization who already have on-premises Active Directory now sign up for Office 365 or Microsoft 365 service. They have created accounts even in the cloud because either they don't know or they choose to. Like the case I even said that the requirement and compliance requirement made them to manage different identity platform for the two platforms. Now, there can be a change later that say now we can sync user, we can merge identity. What you need to do is to set up Azure Active Directory Connect or Entra ID Connect to sync the user ID, the user that exists in on-prem, sync it with that of the cloud. But there are things you must put into consideration before you do that. It means if you have on-prem, you have AI, Idowu, as I believe this is user principal name or username, right? Not the email now. You have Idowu in on-prem, and in the cloud, you have Akinwale Idowu. Something that need to match is their logon name and the email address, right? It's called user principal name. That logon name is called user principal name. It's in email address format. Remember that for the on-prem, you can type just the username and you'll be able to log in. But if you have to go to Microsoft 365, you must type the username in email address format. That's what is called user principal name. So what you need to do is to merge the two accounts and ensure that you don't have duplicate. You must ensure that the email address that is set on-prem is matching with the one that is in the cloud. And at the same time, their logon, that's the alias, is matching also. It's called soft matching. Soft matching is a process of merging both Azure Active Directory and on-premises Active Directory users together to now become one. So I think, so we take that for the last, then we'll, someone is asking what's the difference between Azure AD. I think you should have understood by now. So it's like using your Google account to access. Okay, I think we are done.
Yes, ma. Yes, ma. We are done for today. We are done for today. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for this section. So I can see someone raising up their hand. So you can just use the chat window to drop your question, please. Mary, Uwera, and Kabirat. Okay, Dele, just use the chat section. You have 2 minutes to drop your question. So we could just attend to your question and just close the section. So and Emmanuel, your hand is raised. You can go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so while we're waiting for the question, so I wanted to point out somebody was asking that the Naira account is not, they're not unable to use it to open a trial tenant. So basically, Microsoft, due to CBN policy, Naira account was blocked. So you cannot use a Naira account to make an international transaction. So it's either you get a dollar account or a euro account or a pounds account. So you get a card that comes with those accounts. And I know today, Zenith Bank has those cards and they work for, that's for their DOM accounts, for their euro accounts. I've tried those two before to open a tenant. It works. Then if you don't want to get a dollar account, if you want to use a Naira account, as of today, the only bank I know that their Naira account works for those international transactions is Providus Bank. And Microsoft does not accept a virtual card. So if you try to use a virtual card, they will flag it. They know if a card is virtual. So it has to be a real card. So Providence Bank, you can walk into Providence Bank and request for, so they have a card called Platinum card, although the charge is a bit high. It's about 5,000 naira for the card, but that card can be used to set up a trial. Is a naira card and can be used to set up a trial account, and also maybe if you want to play around Azure as well, you can also use it. Yeah.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for that contribution. So one of them has dropped the question. He say, "Thank you, Ma, and other organizer. Please, I would like more clarity on tools used in on-premise directory. How exactly does it work?" Hello, Ma, are you there?
Yeah, Emmanuel.
Yes, ma'am.
It's when syncing object from, oh, okay. On tools used in the on-premise directory. How exactly does it work? So, are you talking about the Active Directory on-prem?
Yeah, for that person, is talking about the on-premise because the person say, "Please, I would like more clarity on tools used in the on-premise
Okay,
directory. How
on-premise
does it work?"
directory.
Yes, ma'am.
How does it work? Oh, so two in the on-premise directory. Here we're talking majorly about Microsoft Windows Active Directory server. So for you to set it up first, you need to get your hardware or virtual machine, install a Windows server, and then you can go to add Windows and add roles and features, and add the Windows Server Active Directory domain services role. So how does it work? It's just like we explained for the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 now. The same thing, once you set up the server finish, you need to create your accounts. As you create your accounts, that account, you might have other services that need to access those accounts. You creating the accounts and without any service that need to use it is useless. But the first use case for it is you want to be able to control your computers. You want to maybe block USB. You don't want users to use USB drive on their PC. You can go into your Active Directory, create USB block policy. But for it to take effect, for it to work, you must join, they call it domain join. You must join your computer to that particular Active Directory domain that you have created. And then afterwards, you can then assign policy. The group policy you created, you can assign it to the computer and it will automatically block the PC. I don't know. I think you might need to visit or do a bit of study around Windows Active Directory if you want